Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Monday show with myself, Andrew Musgrove, and him, Aaron Stokes. With it being the international break, we're doing something slightly different today. Firstly, we're not live, but do ensure when you watch this back on YouTube to get into the comments, because this is a video which is going to need your interaction. Please share it as well, because a lot of hard work has gone into it, but we need you guys to put it out to a wider audience. If you listen on the audio platform, get in touch via social media and I will respond to you guys. And what are we doing, I hear you ask? Well, me and Aaron have had this plan for quite a few months now, but illness or what have you has always got in the way of doing it. But finally, we are here in the studio and ready to bring you a start 11 each that we have picked based upon players who we wish had stayed longer at Newcastle United. Trust me, this has been months in the making. A load of work has gone into it. We hope you guys enjoy it as much as we hope we will do bringing it to you. We'll run through our teams and then we'll settle on an overall starting 11. Any duplicates from both sides will get an automatic pass into the starting 11 before we fill in the rest of the slots. You might remember we did this a similar show about 6 months ago now. Was it in the summer, was it?
Yeah.
I can't remember when it was. About a starting 11 based upon players who were rumoured to be joining Newcastle United. That was a lot of fun. This will be a lot of fun. This episode brought to you by NORD VPN. I've just come back from a lovely weekend away in the North York Moors, and having NORD VPN on my phone was a huge help as I logged into the Wi-Fi at the place I was staying at. Nice to know that I'm protected when I do need to log on to unfamiliar Wi-Fi. Get your special discounted offer on your NORD VPN plan, including an extra 4 months on the 2-year plan by clicking on the link in the description box below. Loads of you have done so. You're supporting the podcast. We can't thank you enough. Thanks to NordVPN. Hit that link in the podcast description box. Aaron, you well? Surviving without seeing Newcastle United play?
Yeah, I'm excited for this. We had loads of fun, didn't we, doing that Room at 11 one. Everybody who listened and watched was very complimentary with their feedback, and I think it went down quite well. So hopefully this one is as well received, because we've put a lot of work into it. We've been talking about doing it for ages. Even as of an hour ago, I was still agonising over a few picks. I've taken it really seriously. I've got an honourable mentions list of players that aren't going to make it into my 11. I could have probably had 2 full squads, never mind just 11 players. So hopefully.
So many to choose from. Before we get into the show, I think we have to just spend 10 minutes or talking about England's performance over the weekend and the fact that England had 3 Newcastle United players starting for them in Anthony Gordon, Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall. The first time since April 1997 that Newcastle have had 3 players starting for England, which was Rob Lee, Alan Shearer and David Batty. I mean, that is just tremendous to see, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. I don't think many people are expecting Lee Carsley to start all 3. But I actually think, when it dust settles a bit, Lee Carsley will be looked at as a really, really successful England manager, because in that interim time, he's brought so many fresh players through, not just Lewis Hall, not just Tino Livramento, but obviously Harwood Bellis, Madueke. He's given a lot of chances to players who never really got in. Southgate was talked about Eddie Howe having those favourites, but Gareth Southgate was very much sticking to his guns with the players he liked. So I think Carsley did really well. It's a shame they got beat against Greece, because I wonder if they hadn't, would they have got Tuchel, or would Lee Carsley be the man taking them into the World Cup? We won't know. But certainly for the Newcastle players, I think they would have benefited from that. He obviously really rates Anthony Gordon. He's started him in pretty much every game. And he's obviously worked with Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento at youth level. So he's been a really good coach for them. I think he's been a really good coach for England. But yeah, 3 starting on Sunday was great to see.
I like what he's done, because, like you see, he's kind of planted the seeds, hasn't he? He's opened the door for so many players that Tuchel's got a lot to think about when it comes to January. But for Newcastle United to have those 3 players starting, Nick Pope will definitely be within a chance of being in the next England squad. I think what it does for Newcastle United, it's another feather in the cap when it comes to a sales pitch for potential arrivals. Of course, you want big wages, you want European football, you want cup wins, but also you want to know that you join Newcastle United, and if you're not already in your team at international level, playing for Newcastle United will get you over that line. And we've seen that not just with the three there who featured on Sunday, but across the world with Bruno and Joe Linton and others who are getting their international caps because Newcastle United are playing so well, and they're playing well in a good Newcastle United side.
Yeah, and the stats absolutely back that up. I mean, across Mike Ashley's 14 years in charge, I think there was 11 England caps given to Newcastle players, and in the last week alone, there's been 5. So it just goes to show you, how quickly Newcastle have moved forward in such a short period of time. And as you say, yeah, great sales pitch for the club. For anybody who's coming or considering a transfer to Newcastle, you look at what Eddie Howe's done, especially with Anthony Gordon, because, I mean, when Newcastle signed him for 45 million, nobody thought 2 years down the line he would be essentially England's starting left-sided attacker. And on top of that, I think, and look what it's going to do for Harvey Barnes and Sean Longstaff. Maybe those players who haven't had a sniff yet, but you wouldn't be surprised with a purple patch if they maybe sneak in. That's maybe more Barnes than Longstaff, but you get my gist. Players that are on the cusp, not just for England, but for their countries in general, I think it'll do their confidence a world of good as well.
And did you see the Newcastle United Instagram last night being a wee bit cheeky in the eyes of some Newcastle United fans? I'm sure Newcastle United would distance themselves from the accusations that were being thrown at the feet of them, but they posted a picture of Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento hugging during the game, or maybe as the whistle goes. And Mark Gee is over the shoulder of Lewis Hall, and Newcastle United have just put a little heart emoji with a black and white flag. And lots of people claiming that the admin know exactly what they're doing here.
They will obviously say that was the only photo available to them, but yeah, maybe a little bit of a subliminal messaging going on there. I mean, look, being serious, Newcastle potentially might have England's right back for the next 10 years, England's left back for the next 10 years. If they sign Mark Gahey, then that's England's centre back. I mean, he captained the team last night. That's already 3 of the back 5. Does Nick Pope get back in? Do they go and sign James Trafford, who's obviously coming through? Yeah, the future's bright.
And what does it do for the next month of Newcastle United's season? You've been called up to the England squad. You've gone away. You've had a good couple of games for the likes of Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall. You've made your debut. Anthony Gordon's finally got the goal, which he hasn't managed to get. The boost and the spirit that will bring to the Newcastle United squad, because your returning players are coming back on such a high. That's going to be a tremendous boost for the West Ham game and hopefully games after that.
Yeah, of course it will. I mean, especially for those 2 players that you mentioned, because Livramento was obviously had to wait so long. He's been called up to all of the last 3 squads, even though one of them was a bit belated, the call-up. But he's had to wait for that first start. Lewis Hall obviously came straight in, featured in a game and a half. But also, not just looking at England, I'm looking over at Italy and Sandro Tonali playing another 290 minutes. Alexander Isak scoring yet again and assisting in Sweden's win over Slovakia. So overall, it's been an absolutely fantastic international break for Newcastle as a whole, not just for England.
And touch wood, because I'm not sure if there's any more games coming up, is there?
Yeah.
Is that it now?
Sure.
England are done, aren't they?
Yeah,
but
England
I don't know about maybe Brazil or
yeah.
No one's injured. Everyone's going to come back fighting fit, right?
Not yet.
Good. That's what we liked to see. Yeah, tremendous for Lewis. I mean, just to finish off on that point, the fact that we're seeing Lewis Hall, England international, is quite something considering where he was this time last year. Considering really where he was
at the start of the season.
Yeah, because I made the point that I asked the question: do Newcastle need to go out in January and sign an out-and-out left back, or someone a bit more experienced? And I hold my hands up and admit I said that. I've been proved wrong up to this point, but I think it was definitely a question worth asking. And yet we're sitting here a few months later. He's been the player of the season so far. He's in the England squad with a real chance of making that his position for the next decade.
Yeah, well, I think you don't even have to go back to last season, really, because I remember sitting in St James's Park for the first game of this season when Newcastle beat Southampton 1-0, and 10-man Newcastle were getting battered for a lot of that game, and Lewis Hall really, really struggled. And he lost his place. People forget. He lost a place in the team to Lloyd Kelly, and there was maybe a little bit of debate, which was very short-lived, as to who would get that spot. And Lewis Hall's kicked on ever since he came off the bench at Fulham, and he's made that position his own. And he's impressed, twice in a couple of days for England as well.
And again, another thing to point to you already have for potential arrivals for the youth lads already in the team. Look at the path he's gone. you can follow that same path.
Exactly.
So brilliant to see, absolutely brilliant to see. Right, let's get on with the remainder of the show. This is going to be a fun one, trust us. So let's set the rules. So we're picking the starting 11 each. My formation is a good old 4-4-2, and yours is
4-4-2.
Grand. And the criteria for a place in the starting 11 is that we wished that these two players stayed longer at the club, but we're not putting a time scale on their stay, which does leave the choice open slightly. Was it difficult for you to come to a starting 11?
Weirdly, a couple of positions were really simple. Goalkeeper was easy. A couple of centre backs were easy. I had loads of midfield options. The bit where I struggled really for full backs, and I've got about 8 strikers on the list that could get in. So 6 of them have settled for a place on the bench. It's a very attacking looking bench. But overall, I found it okay. I mean, there's so many players you could choose from, isn't there?
Yes, make sure you get into the comments and let us know about our choices and anyone that we've missed out. We're going to go with the goalkeeper first off. And I have to say, this was my toughest decision because I've picked someone. I say toughest, he's actually the only person that came into my head. But when I think about the player, he hasn't really done much since leaving Newcastle. So I'm kind of like,
we're definitely going to be
different
players.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I've gone for Freddie Woodman. So that's my choice.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm intrigued to know who you've got.
Okay.
At Newcastle for 9 years, was always tipped for big things, including the #1 jersey. Just never happened. Made 4 appearances for the club. Spent a load of time out on loan before moving to Preston permanently in 2022. Where he's had a decent career so far. He's played over 100 times. He won Player of the Season in 2023. This one is most certainly, definitely one that is based on what might have been rather than something that's been achieved. But I think if you remember the 4 appearances he did make in the Premier League, he didn't cover himself in glory. It was kind of the sliding doors moment, if you will, because he had a real opportunity to make that position his own. He looked nervous. He looked raw. You know, when I checked his, I'm surprised he's actually 27. So those appearances in the team came when he was about 23, 24. So still young, but old enough and kind of experience might be the wrong word, but being around enough to know how to handle those situations. And if you think back to that Manchester United game in that run of 4, he was all over the shop, wasn't he? Conceded 12 in those 4 games. And you feel like the opportunity just got the better of him. Like it was weighing on his mind, like it's now or never. Unfortunately, it was never. But I always think, you know, what might have been with Woodman, because clearly got the ability, got the talent. It just never was the right time. And when it was the time, he just buckled, I think.
And as you say, it was Dubravka and Darlow, wasn't it? Both injured at the time. He had to step up for, those games in the season around what, 2021?
Yeah, 21, 22.
Yeah.
But, you know, like there was such excitement. People were really excited to see him finally get his chance.
Yeah. And as you say, if those 4 games had gone differently, who knows where he'd be now?
We'd be sitting here now, I think, him as #1.
Because even when he left Newcastle, he went, or not, maybe not after he left Newcastle, but when he was at Preston, they had that run. Was it last season before, where he was keeping clean sheet after clean sheet? And some people were thinking, "Who have Newcastle let one go here?" Maybe it's died off a little bit now, the hype around him. I mean, if I'm honest, I completely forgot he was even at Preston. But yeah, I understand why you've got him in.
I say that because honestly, no one else came into my mind.
See, goalkeeper for me was probably one of the easiest positions to pick.
But before you tell us, I mean, so because I think people are going to be interested to know how we've picked the players, because it's more than just them going too soon. You know, are you picking them based on what they've gone on to achieve in their career, what they might have achieved? I mean, it's a mix for me. But
I've got a mix. So some players, you know, maybe didn't do that much for Newcastle, but they've gone on and had really good careers, and you look back and think, you know, Newcastle could have had something there. But then other positions I've gone for, they might have had a really long career at Newcastle, but I just think even then, a lot of mine have left around the Ashley era when they maybe shouldn't have. They've been sold before their time. So
just make a quick prediction. Obviously, I've told you who my goalkeeper is, and it's clear we don't agree.
Yeah.
But for the other 10 positions, how many do you think we've got the same?
I think we'll have a couple.
I think 2.
I think we'll have 3 the same.
Okay,
we'll go 3.
Your goalkeeper?
So I've gone for a totally different option for a goalkeeper, and you'll see why in a minute. And I think a lot of people are going to be sat here thinking, "What? You can't have this guy." But I'm going to explain. I've gone for Shay Given.
I thought you might do, you know.
Now, this was one of my easiest because, look, Shay Given had an unbelievable career at Newcastle. He was, he's what, second, third in all-time appearances. He's up there with the best. But I remember being a really young lad, sat in St James's Park in my season ticket seat with my mum and my dad, and it was 2008. I've got the date here, 28th of December 2008, and Newcastle got beat 5-1 at home to Liverpool. And I remember being sat quite close to giving him my seat and just thinking, he looks like he's ready to go. He looked so miserable. He was fuming. It was just a real toxic atmosphere. And 3 days later, he released a statement via his lawyer that said, Shea is very despondent following the poor performance last weekend. It was the lowest point of his football career and a performance he wished not to repeat. When he signed his 5-year contract just a few years ago, it was on the basis that the club would be challenging for major honours, but on present evidence, all he can see ahead is the turmoil on and off the pitch is a battle for survival. Having served the club with loyalty for 11 years, Shea feels compelled to consider his position in light of interest being expressed in him by City, Arsenal and Tottenham. A month later, he's a Man City player. So the reason I've picked him is because a club legend like that should not have had an exit like that. He should have stayed and finished his career at Newcastle. He should be the all-time record appearance holder. And I love Shea. I love him as a person. I love him as a player. So he was one I thought, even though he did 11 years, gone too soon, should have stayed longer.
No, I agree with you, and I can see why you've gone with that pick. I think many people will agree with you. And yeah, that game against Liverpool was just the final straw, wasn't it? Yeah. Because I think if he's honest with himself, and this is just me speaking now, I don't know this is the actual truth, but I think he probably already made his mind up, and it just needed that one last thing to tip him over the edge. And to come into the dressing room after conceding 5, knowing it should have been maybe 10 or 11, he was probably ready to sign an exit contract announcement at 3 goals. Not when he ended up conceding 5. Yeah, but a great servant. No one begrudged him his exit. I think the only thing that I look back on really is the fact that you look at City and what happened after he left City. Like, I would have loved him to have gone to City and won more than
at the time.
Than he did.
Yeah,
because he just won the FA Cup, didn't he?
I think so. Yeah,
didn't win anything else. He was kind of in that Mark Hughesy
era,
the beginning.
Yeah,
But yeah, I can see why you've gone with that, and I think many people would agree with you. Next up, we'll go with the right back. Go on.
No, go.
I've gone for Habib Beye. Okay,
now I was torn between 2. Habib Beye is one of my all-time favourite Newcastle players, which a lot of people probably don't say, but I loved him.
I agree with you.
I loved him. He was so underrated.
I was over the moon when he signed.
And he was an absolute bargain. He was a fantastic player. He's on my honourable mentions list because I've gone for somewhere else, but great player.
Okay, well, I've gone with him because I was, let's say, over the moon when he finally signed for Newcastle United. He was like the Bas Doss of a few years later, where he was just linked repeatedly with the move to Newcastle United, and finally they signed him for, I think, £3 million. He'd been an absolute mainstay there, a decent Marseille side, which included Didier Drogba. He played against Newcastle as well in the UEFA Cup. He was a tremendous fullback, had pace about him, could pass the ball about. He was athletic. He was deceptively strong. He was quick. I was a huge fan of his, and I was so pleased when they signed him. And then obviously he was part of that team that went down at the Championship, that disastrous season where Keegan left very early on and then they were relegated, left to join Aston Villa, where it went very bad for him. I think he played 6 times or something in 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So not a great move for him. Then he ended up at Doncaster, I think it was.
20 games for Doncaster.
In hindsight, I wonder whether he regrets pushing for a move and actually leaving Newcastle United. I think Danny Simpson would have been the man to replace him, if I'm not mistaken. But he would have excelled in the Championship, gone straight back up, in a team like with Colaccini and what have you, and they would have done. Was that the first? No, right, Colaccini. Yeah, that he would have done tremendous in the Championship. But yeah, I was sad to see him go, but understood why he went, because he wanted to play Premier League football. But again, one of those where you think, right man, probably wrong time.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of my picks are, I could understand why they've went, but it doesn't make it any easier. The only thing about Beye, I mean, he left Newcastle in 2009 and he retired in, it looks like, after Doncaster 2012, and he only featured about 29 times after leaving Newcastle.
So he should have stayed.
Should have stayed on and got them back up. Look, I can't really disagree with it. Loved him. Absolute bargain for $2 million. So yeah, I rate it. Again, I've gone for a slightly different tact, and I will caveat this by saying, right back and left back, I struggled with. I didn't put too much time and effort into them because I was struggling for them. But Steve Watson, for me, beat out Habib Beye.
Okay.
And again, it's a bit like Given. He played over 200 times for Newcastle. He had 8 years at the club. But when you look at what he went on to do after, he was by no means done when Newcastle sold him in 98. He went on to play for Villa, Everton, West Brom, and both Sheffield clubs. I think he played over 150 times for Everton alone. So again, one that didn't want to leave. He was sold by Ruud Huller, said he never wanted to leave the club and that it ripped his heart out. So yeah, those were the two, and Watson won out.
I did not see that coming. I really didn't.
Did you not?
But now you've sold it to us, I can see why.
Again, it's like, he's had a fantastic career. He'll be remembered for his Newcastle exploits, but I just think it's another one where you think, did Newcastle really need to sell him?
Interesting. Yeah, been a great servant for the club. And there's plenty of people like that where you think they got to a certain age and they were moved on, but then you went and had a look at what they did afterwards, and you think, oh, goodness me, why did Newcastle cash in on them, even though they were probably nearing, but they were closer to retirement than they were starting out their career. I'm just looking back on some quotes here from Kubai. And it's interesting, the summer he left, he said, I'd like nothing more to stay and help the team get back to where it belongs, but there's no chance of us being promoted the way things are going. And you might remember, ladies and gents, that's the summer when Kevin Nolan and other players had that dressing room kind of autopsy where they lost 6-1, I think it was, to Leyton Orient and Leyton Orient, and they went in and said, right, this is not good enough. And Bai's worries there were totally justified, and it just shows you what an absolute chaotic mess it was at that time. But yeah, I can see Steve Watson. Yeah, so we'll have to. I mean, we're going to have to pick a starting 11 at the end, so it's going to be interesting. Who gets that right back slot?
Now, I think we're going to have the same centre back for at least one of the positions, if not both of them.
Well, then fire away.
So my first one I've gone for is Aaron Hughes.
Okay.
Purely because of the fee involved to get rid of him. They sold him for $1 million under Graham Souness, despite the fact he was such a loyal servant. Very good at both right back and centre back. And then again, like Steve Watson, went on to do really, really good things. He played 54 times for Villa after leaving, and then played almost 200 games for Fulham. He was obviously part of that team under Hodgson, who went really far in Europe, did really well in the Premier League. Just a really, really shrewd operator, and to lose him for $1 million seems like such a waste.
Yeah, and if you've watched Just Take 3, which you wouldn't have done because it's going to be coming out tomorrow, but if you've listened to it, you will know in the latest episode that I lose my cool at realising that Aaron Hughes was 25 when Graham Souness sold him for Newcastle United. 25. He should have been there.
Like such a pointless sale. Do you know what I mean? For an experienced player like that, to lose him to another Premier League club for $1 million just seems
absolutely crazy. Because I remember being angry when he was sold, but then find out over the weekend that he was 25. And I was just like, oh my God, like, he should have been Newcastle United for another 5 years. And imagine what he could have achieved. And you've read out the list of appearances there. Brilliant, great attitude, proper workhorse, just got on with it. Versatile, which was absolutely key as well. And yeah, absolutely disgraceful sale, to be quite honest. I haven't got him.
Okay, I thought you'd have him. I thought that would be one of our joint ones.
I've got Jonathan Woodgate.
Okay, he's my second.
Okay, so he's the first man to get a buy into the team. Signed in 2003 for $9 million from Leeds United as the club went on a bit of a fire sale. In hindsight, it was maybe a bit of a gamble because the previous 2 seasons he'd missed a lot of football, but he had played 18 times before moving to Newcastle that season. Would play 37 times for Newcastle in 1.5 seasons before amazingly moving to Real Madrid for £13.4 million. That was a disaster. Woodgate, though, remains one of the finest centre-backs we see at Newcastle, and again, a point of what might have been. But what we did see, he was just really, really good, and he did it so effortlessly.
A Rolls Royce of a centre-back one. He was so good. But see, now Woodgate is probably, he bucks the trend of Watson and Hughes in terms of what he did after he left Newcastle, because actually, it sort of fell apart from after Newcastle. You obviously understand the reasons that he left, even though no one wanted him to. It was Madrid, they had to go. But then obviously, what would his career have been like if he hadn't went?
Yeah, and it was probably as well, his exit was probably the beginning of the end for Sir Bobby Robson at Newcastle, because he didn't want him to go, and Freddie Shepherd cashed in.
Yeah.
again, look, we don't know what his injury record would have been like.
It was. I mean, his record was terrible.
Yeah,
it was awful.
He
So I
suffered
understand why
an
he was
injury
so-
towards the end of that season, hadn't he?
Yeah,
He didn't play many games in that to the end of that full season. So Newcastle were maybe just looking to get the best pound they could for him, but it was a big blow. But his Madrid debut was awful.
yeah. Own
Really,
goal as
really
well,
awful.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Own goal and sent off.
Yeah.
I mean, can you think of many worse debuts than that? I think he probably holds the badge for that one, doesn't he? But yeah, he's one of those players who is remembered so fondly for doing so little. Like he's up there with kind of like Tony Green, whose injury was ended because of whose career was ended because of injury. But he's held in such high esteem. And I think it was just because he was just so
how
good.
good he was,
Like
and I think
everything looked so natural, and the way he controlled the ball, the way he mocked, players out of the game. He mocked Drogba out of the game the first leg of the UEFA Cup semi-final, and then he got injured and he missed the second leg, and Drogba went on to have an absolute field day. But he was just good in kind of every aspect that you need to be when you're a centre back, and few that have played since in black and white have been better than him. There are a couple who are at least on the level. I mean, Sven Botman, we've got to see what he does when he comes back from injury. Fingers crossed he comes back better and stronger than he was. But few centre-backs have been better than Woodgate in black and white since.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show how good he was, that the fact he was only there for a season and he's still thought of, he's still on these lists. Would that have been the case if he'd been there 2 or 3 years and suffered with those injuries and never played as much? We obviously won't know, but
I think he's probably also helped by what followed in there.
Exactly.
Good old Boom song.
Yeah.
He wasn't too far down the line after Woodgate left, which wasn't a fantastic
he's
fight.
not the next one.
He's definitely not part of Woodgate. Do you want me to go next with who it is?
Yeah, I do.
Now, there was a couple I could have picked, but I settled on Florian Lejeune.
Okay.
Because his path in Newcastle is up there with one of the biggest what might have been. We like Fabian Schär. He is great with the ball at his feet, but I think a fit Florian Lejeune was streets ahead of Fabian Schär. He could read the game really well. He was hard to beat in the air, couldn't half pass a ball. Signed for 8.7 million in 2017 from Eibar in Spain. Had spent time at Man City before moving back to Spain. It looked like a bargain. After we've seen him play a few times, you were really standing up and starting to notice at how classy this guy looked. The way he could pass the ball, the way strikers were unable to get the better of him. But he only played 46 times for the club.
Yeah, struggled with knee injuries, didn't he? Which is, pretty much the story of the other centre halves.
He was brilliant.
He was fantastic. Brilliant. Yeah, if I'm honest, he hadn't even crossed my mind for this list, but I see why you've picked him.
Them two together, Woodgate and Lejeune at the back. I mean, you're not beating them, are you?
Unless they're in the physio room. Yeah. Great servant, fantastic player, very versatile. We'll never forget what he did at Goodison Park when my stream was so far behind. Newcastle had actually equalised to make it 2-2, and my stream was still on 2-0 when he scored twice in stoppage time. So good shout, and I think we'll be hard pressed to pick between Hughes or him for a starting spot.
Well, we just got to also pay thanks to Harry Kane for ruining Florian Lejeune's Premier League career, because it was that injury that he suffered at the hands of Harry Kane who got away with it because he's England's darling little boy. Just a horrendous challenge, which he's carried out since on other players, by the way. I'm sure he doesn't mean to harm players, but he always seems to. And again, I often talk about moments in time on this podcast that you just think back and think what might have been. But had he not suffered that injury, he's gone on to play 30 times in each of the last 3 campaigns since moving away from Newcastle United. And I often can't help but think it should have been Newcastle United, because even with all the money that's come into the club, and they've bought Sven Botman, but could you imagine a fit Florian Lejeune going up against the likes of Botman and Schär and Dan Burn for a place?
Imagine what it would have been like under Eddie Howe.
Yeah, exactly.
We've seen how look at Fabian Schär, who would have been his defensive partner.
And he's only a year older than Fabian Schär.
Look at the level he's raised under Howe.
He's one of those players I just think in a parallel universe, we'll be sitting here talking about him having, over 100 appearances for Newcastle United and just been absolutely brilliant, because what we saw in limited time of him in black and white, I think left a lot of people impressed. And actually, he's probably a little bit unfortunate not to be held in the same regard as Jonathan Woodgate, I think. Because I think back...
I don't think he was as good as Woodgate.
No, but I think if you ask people about centre-backs and down the he probably doesn't come into many people's thoughts.
Yeah, well, he didn't come into mine, I'll be honest.
I just remember thinking he's a classic player. He's a classic player.
Good shout. Very left field. I like it.
Left back next.
Again, I'll be honest, not a position that I really had any great strong feeling with, but I've ended up going for Jose Enrique.
Oh, okay.
And again, I think this is more just because of the sort of the feeling around the exit. It was another time of turmoil, like you've just spoke about with Habib Bey, and like we'll speak about with a lot of these selections. And again, just like Given did, he released a statement after leaving and said, "This club is allowing the major players to leave. Seriously, do you think it's the fault of the players? Carroll, Nolan, this club will never fight to be among the top 6 ever again with this policy. I think you fans are the best and deserve the best, not what they are doing at the club. Thank you for everyone to support me." That's a very bold statement
it is.
on Twitter.
I remember applauding it at the time, but now looking back, the way he sold his soul and became Mr. Liverpool.
This is a thing. I think a lot of people will be sat listening to this or watching this and thinking, he's a sellout. He went to Liverpool and all of a sudden he's a Liverpool fan. He forgets about Newcastle. And I get the point, but I think, how good was he? He was fantastic. And I love that partnership down the left with Jonas Gutierrez. And I think, again, it's like so many of these exits, just speaks of such an opportunity waste not to keep him.
No problem going to Liverpool. I've just got a problem with the way he kind of forgot about his time in Newcastle once he went to Liverpool. It was like Liverpool opened the Premier League door to him, and it didn't happen that way. Newcastle United, give him his opportunity. I do in many ways think he kind of maybe forgot that. I mean, Liverpool's a big club, and obviously going much better at Newcastle at the time, and even today. So I can understand it on one hand, but I think it probably did sour the relationship for a lot of Newcastle United fans. It took a long time to get going, but that championship season, he was unstoppable. I mean, the goal against Nottingham Forest, which pretty much sealed Newcastle's promotion, was a special evening. The shirt came off and everything, didn't it? He cut in off the left and fired one at the back of the net. Yeah, and that tremendous relationship with Gutierrez down the left. Brilliant.
Gutierrez, Enrique and Colaccini all had the same pathway in which they signed. They looked well off it. And that season in the championship just seemed to, properly reinvigorate all of them, help them settle in at a much lower level, and they became better players for it. I think your left back's going to win because, if I'm honest, Enrique was just sort of, I'll go for him.
I think if we said on football and ability, then I think Enrique might be my choice, but just because of the way it ended and then what happened since, I think my left back will win the vote here. So I've gone for David Santon.
Okay.
Did he come in your thinking?
I'll be honest, no, but now you've said it, it's a very good shout.
Joined from Inter Milan for a fee of 4 to 5 million, was a huge hit. Was only 20 when he joined, but took the role with real ease. Played 101 times for Newcastle United. More a wing back than a traditional left back. He could really get down the flank, cut inside. He was good with the delivery of the ball, but he grew into those defensive responsibilities as time went on, only to be ousted by Paul Dummett. He would return to Inter Milan on loan, but I think there was regret at the exit. I remember when it happened, being really put out by his exit because he was only 24, 25. He had the best years ahead of him, and he was carted off back to Whitley. Now, Paul Dummett, to be fair, had found his feet, had found form, and had deservedly got that left back slot. But I think to sell Santon back to Whitley was a big error.
And another one who didn't want to leave, his fiance said when he left, he does not want to leave the club. He's been fully fit for a while with no chance to play. Discussing the club's hierarchy, she says they only have intention to make money.
Goodness me, and who was in charge at the time in terms of the hierarchy?
Oh, a certain owner, I can't remember his name.
Well, it's funny because I think 80% of the players we have in this starting 11 will have been from that era, as you mentioned. But yeah, Santon, I think he was just exciting, wasn't he? And you think about left backs now, and we all are praising Lewis Hall for what he's done so far. But you probably have to go back to Santon and then back to Enrique. Paul Dunt would come into the conversation as well for many, and then back to maybe Ollie Bernard in terms of left backs that we remember being actually holding down a place and being talented, because we've had issues at left back for so long. But Santon really had the opportunity there to be a first team left back in Newcastle for a lot longer than he was. 101 times is still not to be sniffed at, but you can't help but think getting sold at the age of 25. Best years ahead of him, man.
Retired at 31.
Did he?
Due to knee injuries. Yep. He went to Inter, then he went to Roma. He was actually part of the Roma squad that was under Jose Mourinho.
Yeah.
Didn't make a single appearance and then retired at 31. Another one which just couldn't get over those injuries. Good shout though. I rate the pick.
Okay.
And I think that's going to win it. But
shall we go into the centre now?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'll let you go first.
Okay. Now I'm going to start with my honourable mentions. And the two that just missed out were Gary Speed, again, longevity, but didn't want to see him go, and Mikel Merino. Both narrowly missed out. So my first one, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? Johan Cabaye.
Johan Cabaye.
Johan Cabaye.
Interesting, because I kind of put him in the same category as Enrique, like ability and talent-wise, you think unbelievable, one of the best we've ever seen, and that's more Cabaye than Enrique. But the way it ended... it just sours it.
I think, and I know this won't be popular, but I think I can forgive him for the way
I thought you were going to say something else there.
What?
I thought for a moment you were going to say he's better than Bruno. That's why I thought the path you were going to go down there. Oh my God, he's not even... Are you going to say that?
I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I would honestly say Johan Cabaye is one of my favourite ever Newcastle players. I absolutely loved him.
Not quite sitting on the fence, but not quite answering the question.
That's just me.
I'm going to... You're not going to answer, are you?
They're two different players. I don't know. Johan Cabaye, I absolutely loved. And I know I'm going to hold my hands up. He went on strike. He forced out his exit. But he was so good. And I just think if things had been different and they'd kept him and he hadn't gone, he would be a club legend. He's a club hero. He would be a club legend. I loved him so much. And again, it was sort of, I know he wanted to leave and he pushed to go and he didn't want to stay. But again, it was this time when Newcastle were a stepping stone club. They had no ambition to really challenge, whereas they had a really good French international midfielder there.
Well, I think it was accelerated, wasn't it? Because he was sold, used Newcastle as a stepping stone to a bigger club.
Yeah.
Then a big club came in, and not any big club, the biggest club in France came in. So obviously he's going to want to go. I think Arsenal,
after he'd already been rejected to go, they wouldn't let him go. Arsenal,
and then also you've got the fact that they finished fourth under Alan Pardew. They only signed Vernon and Anita. So you've got
fifth.
Yeah. You've got a lot of elements swinging around there, which makes a player like Cabaye unhappy, because he feels like he's maybe been lied to. He's then seen the lack of investment in what was a really important moment in Newcastle United's history, and totally backfired the gamble not to sign more than just Anita. So naturally he's looking to go to the next level. But Newcastle United also don't want to lose their best player. It was handled horrendously by both sides. I have to say though, it was a very sweet moment when he missed that penalty. Yeah, Palace. That was very sweet.
Yeah, my favourite memory of Cabaye was my first ever away game down at Old Trafford, and they won 1-0 Cabaye against David Moyes' Man United. And I remember we were all locked in the stadium after, and there was just a 20-minute chant of "Don't sell Cabaye." And I think a couple of weeks later he'd gone because the game was in December. Just
green boat.
He was brilliant.
Went to Palace, as we mentioned there, under Pardew as well.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And still had a bit about him in the Premier League. Tremendous player, ability-wise, fantastic. And look, we were criticising a lot of what happened to Mike Ashley, naturally, because a lot of it was horrendous. But you've got to also praise, in the initial stage, their success at finding these players so cheaply in France. I think the one thing that went wrong for them was that they rested on their laurels and they didn't change approach. They thought because they'd had success with Cabaye and a few others that they were kind of first in the queue, but that just wasn't the case. Other clubs got wise to it, started joining in the race,
and it didn't always work. I mean, they struck so lucky with Cabaye for 4 million. Tiote was around the same. Sissoko obviously came in from Toulouse, was it? But then you look at some of the others, and you look at Remy Cabella didn't work out. Riviere, Sylvain Morveau, who I'm adamant without injuries would have been a such a player. Florian Thauvin, who obviously did so well afterwards, but was really struggled in England. So that period was so strange, wasn't it? Where they just went French.
But it was typical Mike Ashley because they didn't move with the times. They thought that they could get the same talent for the same price, which they paid 2 or 3 years earlier, and it just wasn't ever going to happen because, like everything, inflation, where the prices go up, but then if there's 3 or 4 teams competing, the prices go up further, and they just refused to go along with the market value, thinking they could still cut a cheap deal. So it kind of summed up the Ashley era perfectly. But yeah, I get you. How many appearances did he make on the end?
Not sure.
Was he what, 3 years?
I'll get that up while you argue your pick.
Okay, well, you mentioned 2 of mine who very nearly got in. Mikel Merino was very nearly in.
Yeah.
And I was going to change my second central midfielder for Gary Speed.
Right.
But I'm not. I'm going to stick with my original 11.
Okay.
Speed would get in because he brings that defensive element.
So you're thinking tactically.
My team is very attacking. But just, word for Gary Speed. What he went to do after he left Newcastle United, the engine on him was just unbelievable. The stamina, he was just such a fantastic player. He aged like a fine wine.
Yeah.
And he had a tremendous time at Bolton and at Newcastle United. In hindsight, probably should not have sold them, but very nearly got into my side. He doesn't though. My first pick, Gini Wijnaldum.
Yeah, he's my other.
He's your other one. Okay, so there's a second man who gets the automatic pass into our starting 11. 64 goals and 220 appearances for PSV. Wijnaldum then joined Newcastle in 2015 for £14.5 million. Huge signing, statement signing. Would only stay for 1 season though, as Newcastle were relegated to the Championship. Scored 11 goals in 40 appearances and was just an absolute joy to watch. At least it's in James's Park. Away from home.
Yeah.
But it's in James's Park. He knew where the goal was and he scored 4 against Norwich. He was just absolutely brilliant. You always got the sense he was destined for bigger things. Even when Newcastle United stayed up that season, he would have had 1 more season and then gone on to a bigger club. One of the finest players I have seen in black and white.
Yeah.
Every time he got the ball, you just were, you didn't know what he was going to do, but you knew it was going to be good.
I think you just hit the nail on the head there. If he'd had 2 or 3 seasons at Newcastle and then gone on somewhere else, I don't think he would have made the list over Merino or Speed or someone like that. But I think because we only had him for such a short period of time and he was so good in we noticed the team wasn't even that bad. The team had really good players in. It was just they were absolutely abysmal under Steve McLaren. And I think it's because he was so good in that rotten team. You just think, one, what could he have done if he'd stayed and they'd stayed up with a different manager? If Rafa had kept them up and he'd stayed, he could have done anything.
I think about Sissoko. And I don't mean you disagree with this, but
I could never get on board with Sissoko. He was so frustrating.
It was a team that should not have been relegated.
Yeah, of course it shouldn't.
I'm going to include Sissoko in it. Shelvey, Wijnaldum, but Wijnaldum, man, he just a goal-scoring central midfielder who had the stamina, he had the legs about him, he could, get up and down the pitch. And it's no surprise he went to Liverpool that summer, £23.5 million. It was a bargain, really, when you look back on it, and won pretty much everything he could. Absolutely tremendous. Premier League, Champions League. I'm not sure how many appearances he made for Liverpool, but it was a hell of a lot. Still playing today. I think it wasn't too long ago that he got his Dutch cap.
He's in Saudi, I think. In a minute,
just a tremendous player.
Great player.
Great to watch. Everything you want in a footballer, really. Just exciting. He's someone that's why you pay your money.
Yeah.
You pay your money to go and see someone like him.
Well, I remember they signed him.
I couldn't believe when they signed him.
They signed him as an attacking midfielder because obviously he was a goal-scoring midfielder in Holland. And I remember Mitrovic getting sent off at home to Arsenal in that McLaren season. And Newcastle, I think they lost 1-0, but Wijnaldum was played as a 6 and he was unbelievable. And I just thought he can do it all. And then I remember being at that Norwich game, the 6-2, and he scored 4.
So can I just check? Do we hail Mitrovic as the then Kieran Clark?
Yeah, the man who transformed Wijnaldum.
Yeah.
So there's another slot. So there's 2. Okay. I think we'll have. Will we have? Yeah, we'll definitely have one more because I think there's no way that both of us won't have picked this person.
Right. Well, I need to tell you my other.
You're the centre midfielder. Yeah.
And see what you think. So it was very nearly Gary Speed. very
Okay.
nearly.
Yeah.
But I went for Elliot Anderson. Had we done this a few months ago, it wouldn't have come into my way of thinking. I mean, I think the first time we planned this, he was still Newcastle
He was a
player.
Newcastle player, yeah.
He's been tremendous so for Forest. He really, really has. And look, it might just be luck that he started so well. Forest may go downhill after losing to Newcastle United before the international break. In many ways, I hope they don't, because I think it's a breath of fresh air seeing Forest attack the Premier League the way they do. I think it's a breath of fresh air seeing Elliot Anderson getting game time and holding his own in the Premier League. He looks as good as the majority of us thought it was and will be in England national in time. You're kind of smirking and grimacing here.
I don't agree with it.
You don't?
I think it's too soon to tell, because I think if we do this pod in a couple of years' time, we might be talking about Anderson and Minter together as the two that got away. But I just think, if Elliot Anderson hadn't been sold to Forest this summer, would he start in this team? And I think the answer is no.
The answer, I mean, the first answer that springs to mind is no. But I think Eddie Howe, initially at the start of the season, it's only recently, really, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, the last 3 or 4 games, where he's kind of found the solution. That's Sean Longstaff coming back into the side. But up until then, he's kind of experimented, really. That might be too strong of a word, but he's chopped and he's changed.
He hasn't done his best 3 yet. Yeah, you're right.
So there's no reason why Elliot Anderson would not have been handed an opportunity and then he would have taken it. And this is the point. There's a lot of Newcastle United players in this present day squad who have failed to take their opportunity in recent weeks and months. Harvey Barnes, Jacob Murphy have not taken the opportunity that's been presented to them. Sean Longstaff has, and that's why I think he'll be in the team for now, for the foreseeable, because he's the balance, he's the glue, he's what makes it tick, what allows us Bruno and others to flourish. But look, Joe Willock's come in out of nowhere and now seems to be holding down his place. I think Anderson would have gotten a chance based on what's happened from the start of the season to the last kind of month or so, yeah.
And we don't know what would have happened. I think it's too soon to tell.
Okay.
I get why you've done it. Look, if you ask me, would I prefer Elliot Anderson to have stayed? Absolutely. He's definitely left too soon. But does he get in the 11 of all time left too soon? I just don't know. I think
it's a sign of how confident I am that he's going to be.
We'll come back to us in a year's time and I'll see whether you've been right.
Let me know in the comments if I jumped the gun on.
I understand the pick. I get it. He did leave too soon. I think him and Mint, I would have loved them both to stay. Everyone would. I just think the jury's still out on
55 times he played for Newcastle United. And yeah, look, we didn't see enough of him. And then he was sold reluctantly by Eddie Howe in Newcastle United because of the PSR. And the rules are just totally skew with. But he has been good for Forest. And long may that continue because I want to see him do well.
England call up next week.
Well, I hope as well. And obviously, it'd be good to find this out. And if Eddie Howe, you'd like to tell us at the next press conference, I'm all for this. I'd love to know if there's a cheeky little clause in his deal, because that would be, the Hollywood story, wouldn't it? Elliot Anderson goes away.
Struggle getting that out of Eddie Howe, that information.
Yeah,
so we can hope.
It'd be tremendous if he would come back and win something with Newcastle United. But yeah, Gary Speed, Mikel Merino very nearly made it into those ahead of Elliot Anderson, but I've gone for Anderson. Let me know what you think in the comments about that. Where do you want to go next?
We'll go to the left wing, because I already know people are going to be shouting at me because this player isn't a left winger. It's the only one I've had to shoehorn in.
What have you
so
done?
Before everybody shouts at me here, right, I know this player's not a winger.
He's not a winger.
He's a central midfielder, an attacking midfielder who I've had to put on the left because...
I can't. I'm dreading this. Come on.
Paul Gascoigne.
Why put Paul Gascoigne on the left?
Because, I could have put him in the centre.
Okay.
But I really wanted Wijnaldum and Cabayen. Now...
Well, there's a question for you. Gaza at his peak. Who's better, Wijnaldum, Cabaye, or Gaza? I think many people would say Gaza.
Well, I haven't seen Gaza play in the 6 as well as Wijnaldum did at Arsenal. So I've gone for Gascoigne because I thought I don't want to leave him out, but I don't know where to put him. And I thought, it's a bit of fun. If people want to have a go at me, have a go at me. But he's playing left wing because he can do it all. Left at 20? Had 3 years of him, and then he went to Tottenham and his career exploded. I just think another one again. I mean, this was obviously such a different time period, wasn't it? We've spoken so much about Mike Ashley, but actually
the parallels.
It was Newcastle in the late 80s really struggling to stay afloat, and when the likes of Manchester United and Tottenham are sniffing around you at 20, even though it's your boyhood club. And I think Sir Alex came out, didn't he, and say we were going to sign him, and then Tottenham offered his family a house and 100 grand
I
signing
think
on
he kept
fee.
picking up the phone, didn't he? Saying, I want this, I want that.
Yeah. But so completely different time, completely different era, but it was that same old story of Newcastle United just not being enough.
And in typical Newcastle United fashion, if I'm not mistaken, someone might want to correct me in the comments, I'm pretty sure they just wasted the money they got for him as well.
I think they got
Dave Besant came
they
in.
got 2 million, was it, I think, for
and I'm pretty sure the players they signed were absolutely, they weren't bad players in themselves, but it just did not work out.
That's
an interesting pick.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, he left Newcastle well before I was even born, but you just look at what he did afterwards. And when we were looking at this to pick the teams this morning, I stumbled across an interview.
So I think you're just going to get absolute pelters because I have gone on transfer market. .co.uk just to check.
And he's never played at none of the wing of his life.
I mean, he probably has played somewhere, but in the what we're looking at, the 120 odd appearances that they've got marked down for the clubs he did play. Now, admittedly, it probably doesn't go all the way. But too fair.
And did transfer market is this in the 80s?
No, but I mean, I'm looking at they've gone all the way back to 84, 85 with Newcastle, and
before you get at me in the comments,
got him down to the left.
He's not a winger, right?
So what are you doing there?
Because I've had to put him in the team somewhere.
You get if you really want Paul Gascoigne in the team, you remove Kabay or you remove Wijnaldum,
or change your formation.
Or you change your formation. You don't want Hoyman on the left because your left back is going to be exposed now. Gaza's a free. He's a free man. He's roaming.
So yeah, there's my pick, Gaza out on the left. And you might mark me down because he's out of position, but I've had to find a way for him to get in the team.
Well, there you go. I didn't see that one come. Yeah. I've gone for David Ginola. Because he was.
I'm surprised by that because you I think we've discussed it on the pod recently about you not rating Ginola's time at the club.
I rate his time at the club. I just think it's looked back on maybe a bit too fondly for what the stats give you in terms of entertainment, and you sitting there and thinking, oh my God, he's absolutely brilliant with the ball. Like, yeah, but in terms of hard-cold facts and goals, I mean, I've got it written down here, 7 and 75 is not good enough for a man of his quality, not good enough in a team as good as that team was. But in terms of entertainment, you're not going to get better than David Ginola. Only here for 2 years before Kenny Dalglish dismantled Kevin Keegan's side. He was sold to Spurs for £2.5 million and would go on to win the PFA Players Player of the Year and the Football Writers Association Football of the Year in 1999. So it shows you, after a season and a bit at Tottenham, he really found his feet and was absolutely tremendous. I just feel like we should have seen more of him in black and white. And maybe we'll jump the gun here, but we're going to pick a manager as well. And I'll say now, right now, my manager that I'm picking is Kevin Keegan. Mm-hmm. Because when he left, the second time, people know my views on it, I think he should never have returned. It was a total farce, everything to do with it, the way he was treated. But he should have just said no from as soon as Mike actually picked up the phone. The first time around, I get his reasons for going. Never really recovered from the 12-point lead that they threw away. So they were going on the stock market. He didn't quite want that. But he should have stayed until at least the summer and then maybe had a chance to rebuild. What could have happened? And, you look back on what could have happened with Ginola under Keegan for another couple of years. Who knows when Newcastle would have been.
I mean, there's so many stories, isn't there, of players being sold under Dalglish who were such favourites from the previous era. And you just think, the way that team got dismantled from being so close to winning the league.
Well, it seems, again, we go back to moments in time. If Sir Bobby had come in, that team would have won the Premier League. That team would have won the Premier League because he would have come in, he would have added his own few players that he wanted, but the core and the nucleus would have remained. The attacking nature of it would have remained. We saw what he did when he finally came to Newcastle. The closest thing we've got to Keegan was Sir Bobby Robson. In that side that tried to break the establishment, but to bring Kenny in was a bad move. Great manager, I think, as Alan Shearer says, probably the right man at the wrong time. A few years down the line, who knows what would have happened? But to bring in a man whose style and approach was totally different to Keegan's, it was always going to end badly.
It was them looking for someone who would win them the Premier League.
It was looking for a name.
It was looking for a name who's done it.
It?
I mean, obviously that Blackburn season. Just a few years before, so.
But yeah, Ginola for me.
Pick.
Went on to Spurs to have a very decent career. Didn't quite work at Villa after that, but yeah, I just can't help but think what would have happened had he stayed under Kevin Keegan for a little bit longer. Even in a Kenny Dalglish, it would never have worked because of the way they wanted to play. But yeah, he should never have gone.
Yeah, and as you say, what he did after he left is another example of maybe going too soon. Good pick. I think it'll probably get in above my Gaza in a position he's never played.
Well, we'll see.
Do you want to hear the man who? I mean, this player was in my team until the very, very end, and then I took him out. So an honourable mention must go at Craig Bellamy, because he was my left wing shout for a long time.
Another man Souness pushed to the door.
Yeah,
very interesting.
And look, I mean, I get there was a lot of issues with Bellamy. His attitude, as you say, it was never going to work with Souness, but I just think under a different manager, and I mean, in terms of just pure quality, he was so good, and I just think he left far.
You'd have him on the left, though.
Well, he played on the left for City. I know he didn't really play on the left for Newcastle, but he could have played out on the left. He's definitely more of a left winger than Gaza. But again, you look at what he did after leaving Newcastle. Obviously, went straight to Blackburn. Was really, really good for City under Mark Hughes. So yeah, he got taken out at the last minute. So honourable shout to Bellas.
On the right, you want to go first?
I think we'll probably. Well, we might have. I think we'll have the same person on the right. Again, now this player is again known as a central midfielder, but I'm pretty sure he played on the right for Newcastle, and that is James Milner.
I've got James Milner on the right.
Yeah. I thought that would be our third pick together.
Mr. Versatile, Mr. Longevity.
If I'm honest, before I picked Steve Watson, he was going to be my right back because of how versatile he was.
136 times he played for Newcastle, scoring 11 goals, creating 20. Just felt like he was never truly appreciated by the manager, not Sir Bobby, but more Graham Souness. And maybe the fans to a certain degree as well. We look back now and probably think, oh, what on earth were we doing letting him go? I mean, actually, he stayed for 4 years. So he's probably one of the players who stayed the longest in my starting 11. But Graham Souness just never really brought into it. And he was treated so badly as well. The debacle of the Aston Villa move that never came off. He's having a medical. Then the phone goes and it's cancelled. Get yourself back up the M1. Just like, what on earth are you doing? Where's the respect for him? I know he's not the James Milner of Liverpool and Man City, so he hadn't earned all. Maybe he hadn't won the things that he went on to win. But you just show a common bit of decency to your player, and the way they treated him was horrendous. And I just felt so bad for him. And obviously, he's gone on to achieve everything. He's won everything, hasn't he? At two of the most successful clubs in the last 20 years. And still playing today at 38 in a very exciting Brighton side. Actually, yeah, it's just one of those where you think, what on earth were we doing? What on earth were Newcastle doing?
Well, the two reasons that he got in mine above all else was one, because of what he's obviously went on to do after. I mean, even that Villa team that he joined was so exciting, wasn't it, under Martin O'Neill?
Ashley Young,
Bon Lahore, Gareth Barry, all those players, Stilian Petrov. What he obviously went on to do in his career was fantastic. You look back and think, why did Newcastle let a player of that talent go? But two, it was also, again, it just goes back to the Ashley Smith's management. It was the Kevin Keegan not wanting to lose him, but being promised, who was he promised?
Sebastian
Schweinsteiger. Yeah. And who did he get? Nacho Gonzalez and all those types of players. So, I thought we'd both have him in. I think you ask a lot of people watching and listen to this to pick a couple of players off the top of their head. Milner stands out as one who really did get away early.
A player who I actually wanted Newcastle to sign once he left Liverpool. And I know not everyone will agree with that, but I just think what he could do on and off the pitch, even at this age, would have been so important. I mean, imagine having him to turn to during that Champions League campaign when you're against AC Milan, you've got 1 foot in the...
you need that game management.
And what happens is they just totally lose their heads. James Milner there is the man who could just maybe control things, pull the strings, and just a little hand of caution, a little hand of calmness. I do think that the experience, more than anything he could have brought to Newcastle the last couple of years, would have been invaluable. I do think Newcastle missed a treat there.
We've spoken about, haven't we, when we spoke about the Carabao Cup final, and you looked at Man United's dressing room, and then you looked at Newcastle's, and it was only really Kieran Trippier who's been there and done it on the biggest stages.
Lacking winners.
Yeah, and I think even though Milner was probably still at Liverpool, wasn't he, during the Carabao Cup final, but I get your point. He's still playing in the Premier League. You could have offered them Much needed
Would you like to play
experience.
some James Milner trivia? I feel like we
Always.
need a theme tune.
Always.
So he's played, as we know, a load of games in the Premier League. I haven't got the exact number here, but would you like to see if you can guess the top 5 positions he's played in during his time in the Premier League? So I'll give you the number: 262 times he's played in this position.
Centre midfield.
Yeah. Then 184 times in the second position.
Right midfield.
There we go. 107 times in the third.
Right back.
No. That's the last of the 5. 35 times he's played right back. Not as many as you think.
Left back.
No, that was the next one up. 72. 107 times at left midfield. And I've done that because obviously we know that he's on Twitter or X these days as the boring James Milner. And that trivia is right up there in that category. But yeah, James Milner, another one of what might have been another one of Graham Souness. What were you playing at? I know he was sold on a Glen Roeder, but I think it probably started when Souness just did not value him, which is strange because Souness, he's done it. He's been about. He's won things.
He hasn't come across very well on this podcast in the last hour, Graham Souness.
If you want to come on, Graham, and defend yourself, you're more than welcome. Don't be too scary though. Yeah, so James Milner gets a pass into that's 3 now, isn't it? Your prediction was right.
Yeah, but I think we'll probably have a strike on the list together. Now I've got to say I had so many strikers on this list, ranging from like Remy, who was only there on loan, Andy Carroll the first time round, Demba Ba, Alexander Mitrovic, all of those players on my honourable mentions list. So
one of them is on my list.
Well, I think the one that's going to be on your list is Les Ferdinand.
Les Ferdinand, but one of them you just mentioned as well. You mentioned Ferdinand that.
No, I didn't. Sorry. Oh, sorry. So one of those is on your list.
Yep. One of them is on my list.
I think you've gone for...
And he was pushed very closely by Salman Rondon. Very, very closely. But I've gone for Demba Ba.
Okay.
I just felt because of my other pick, I couldn't have... This is going to sound really stupid. I couldn't have 2... of the same kind of players up front.
You've thought so tactically about this. You've had a defensive midfielder.
You've got to get the balance.
And I've just gone for vibes. I've gone Paul Gascoigne left wing.
Which isn't the 5v1. That's never going to work.
Which doesn't, I've just thought, let's shoehorn as many good players in as possible.
That doesn't work.
I haven't thought anything about them being too similar. So you're
getting sacked after 3 months.
Let's talk about your Demba Ba pick then.
Okay. Just such a talented player.
Yeah.
Signed June 2011. They took a gamble on his knee, proved to be worthwhile. Stayed until January 2013. Scored 29 and 58, and he was just absolutely electrifying. I mean, that partnership we had with Papiss Cissé, and again, if you want to look at it negatively, it's another sign of when things just go tremendously bad when they don't need to. And by you're talking here about shoehorning Gaza on the left. I mean, for whatever reason, Pardew decided that he couldn't play them both up front after it actually working quite well. And he had to put one of them on the left. It was just absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, when we saw them at Bar in full flow, just few better strikers post Alan Shearer than Demba Ba. He had it all. He had pace about him. He could score the most sublime and ridiculous goals, good in the air to a degree. Just everything he seemed to go at the back of the net, and he has scored my most favourite goal ever for Newcastle United, which is the long ball over the top by Cheptiote against Reading.
And he flicks it on the corner,
just on the volley over his shoulder. Superb finish. I just loved watching him. Absolutely brilliant. I love the fact as well, you had that worry about the knee injury, and it proved to be a gamble worth taking. Nice little story there. Again, can you begrudge him his move to Chelsea? Probably not. Didn't work out as well as he'd hoped. He does have that moment that when Gerrard slipped, I suppose, to hang up on his wall.
Yep.
But in hindsight, should he have stayed? He probably could argue maybe.
Well, yeah, he very nearly made it at my team, but he's on my bench. I agree with everything you said there. The thing that really rattled me was that I know he left 11 years ago. So was this fair market value at the time? I don't think so. That's £7 million release clause.
But
criminally low. If they're going to lose him, you need to lose him.
Release clauses are mental anyway, aren't they? When you think about it.
I think the fact that they lost him for $7 million added to the.
But again, what does it prove about that era and that time?
Yeah, mismanagement.
Proper, and that's one thing they've got now. Up there at St James's Park. Okay, look, the summer was a little bit of a mess, and they will learn from that. But more than anything, they know what they're doing. You know, yes, we didn't want to see Anderson go, we didn't want to see him go, but you've also got the other thing that Bruno wanted a release clause in his contract, and they said, okay, £100 million. No one came in for him because it was ridiculously high. You know, they are protecting themselves with these players. If Isaac signs a new deal, he'll want something in there, but it'll be again 120, 130 million. They know what they're doing. You know, the bigger clubs, so to speak, in the league are not going to be able to just snap up Newcastle's best players for a low price because they know what they're doing up there.
Yeah.
And they didn't under Mike Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Good pick. Yeah, so Barr didn't make it in, Mitrovic didn't make it in, like Remy, even though he's only on loan. I wish he'd stayed.
Again,
Andy Carroll.
He had a lot of work to do because the whole QPR
He was so good.
He was,
for
but
us.
Maybe I'm just too sensitive.
Anyway, he's on the honourable mentions list. As I said, Les Ferdinand is my first pick. And is he yours?
He is.
He is. I thought he'd be yours. One of you two. I mean, what needs to be said? He left when he was what, 30,
31. So for £6 million.
So for £6 million. And obviously I understand the reasons that he left. There was reasons he, Dalglish didn't want him, whatever. But you look at what he did after Newcastle, and he was by no means finished at all.
39 goals for Tottenham.
Yeah, and he played over 100 times for Tottenham, 39 goals. He then after Newcastle, he played for 6 more teams.
Leicester, West Ham.
Yeah. Bolton. Watford. I mean, I'm not saying he was a success at all these clubs, West Ham, but he was he had legs still at that point. I'm
sure his last season for Leicester at the age of maybe 38 or something, I'm sure he scored 13 goals. I'm just going to quickly check it now because I've said that now where we are. Yeah, Leicester. Played for Leicester in 2003, 2004. Yeah. He scored 12 goals in 29 appearances.
7 years after he left Newcastle?
Yeah, and he would have been, I can't quite do the maths, but 2003, he was born in 66, or 76, 66, 96, 2006. What's that? Yeah, so he was 37, 38, so he still had it, definitely. And again, he was just treated so badly by a club that should have known better.
Yep.
For them to then pick up the phone after Shearer had got that injury and try to get him back after selling him when he didn't want to go, when he's still got something to offer. Like, what were they expecting? Him just to say, oh, yeah, but I'm on my way back up. No, he did it. We did exactly what I would have done and just said.
But isn't this a coincidence? Well, we've spoken about Gaza in the 80s, Ferdinand in 96. We've spoken about all the ones under Mike Ashley. Again, it's just another example of
treat the stars better.
Just not treating their stars better. I mean, as a footballer, one of the greatest goal scorers to ever grace the Premier League, one of the best heading finishers of a football.
Better than Shearer.
So yeah, he's my first pick, and he's yours as well. So he gets a pass.
He gets a pass. That's 4, right?
Yeah, that's 4. So none of us were right. And then my final pick, and again, I think some people will think, but I went for Andy Cole.
I thought you might have done. Interesting.
Why did you think I might have done?
Because he was so good. I mean, he was just.
So that's why I picked him.
Yeah, you want to say, yeah.
The thing I was thinking about this morning when I picked this though is, if Andy Cole hadn't gone, and he's in this team because I still think he went too soon, but if he hadn't gone, is there an argument to say, well, Shearer wouldn't have happened, or you wouldn't have had Les?
I don't think we would have had Les. I think it was probably always destined.
I mean, Shearer was 18 months down the line, so you could say they would have had Shearer, but you would have probably never had Les, which means should one of them drop out? If I had to drop any of them out, I'd probably drop Cole out. But 68 goals in 84 Newcastle matches sold to their biggest rival at the time. We know why it's been talked about to death, the Keegan bust-ups and all this, but just another example of Newcastle selling, one of the best finishers at a time when they shouldn't have. Too soon.
Really interesting sale when you think about it. I mean, they got Keith Gillespie and £7 million.
£7 million, which was a British record at the time.
Yeah, and then if you want to ask, would they've got Les had he stayed, then you say, okay, but would we've got Barcelona, it's James, like it's all those,
it's all those sliding doors moments, isn't it?
Tremendous goal scorer. It's funny because you talk about Les Ferdinand, he's looked back, you were hard pressed to find anyone that'll say a bad word about Les Ferdinand. But Andy Cole's a little bit different. And I don't know whether it's because he joined Manchester United and then we were rivals against them and how they won the league in 95, 96.
And he left under a bit of a cloud.
Yeah, but again, it wasn't necessarily like he wanted.
He wasn't
to
pushing
go.
to go like Kabay,
So,
was he? Yeah.
But since he left Newcastle United, I don't think people look back on his goal scoring exploits as fondly as others, but his attitude and character, people don't seem to look back on as like so fondly. I don't know if that's because of the side.
Bad trainer, wasn't he?
Yeah,
especially.
But is it because he joined Manchester United? I mean, he's always had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, I think, because I'm sure he did an interview a few months ago where he talks about not getting as much respect as other goal scorers.
He speaks a lot about Newcastle. He's always in the papers every couple of months talking about, like you say, about not getting enough respect, or about the bust up with Keegan or why he left.
Which is strange though when you think about what he won at Manchester United.
Yeah. He went to Man United, 93 goals in 195 games. He won he won countless Premier Leagues. He won Champions League. I mean, after that though, Blackburn, good record. Fulham, went to Man City, Portsmouth, Birmingham, Sunderland, Burnley. Burnley, weirdly, in 2008, he scored 6 and 13, and then Nottingham Forest. He had a very, very long career. He played for 13 years after leaving Newcastle.
It shows you, I suppose, the guts that Kevin Keegan had to make that call. Everyone remembers the pictures and the videos of him standing on the steps of the Millburn, explaining his decision to irate fans. It shows you the trust that Sir John Hall had in Kevin Keegan. I remember him saying something on the lines, you got to let your manager make the right decision, even if you think it's kind of the wrong one, and he did that, and it worked out right. It looked like it was going to work out brilliantly, actually, in the end. Tremendous goal scorer, Andy Cole, scored some really important goals, some really nice goals, great record. So yeah, I mean that's quite a record. Yeah, that's quite a list to choose from. Just quick want to read this quote from Alan Shearer. It says, "One of the worst decisions this football club has ever made was to sell Les Ferdinand. It was made by another Miles, Kenny Dalglish. The club agreed a fee of $6 million with Spurs on the eve of a pre-season tournament at Goodison Park at Everton. They told Les, and of course Les didn't want to leave. Subsequently, I broke my ankle in the game at Goodison Park, and Kenny, Freddie Shepherd and others went and tried everything they could do in their power to stop the deal going through. Les refused. He said, 'You wanted it with me, and that's it. I'm off,' and rightly so." And yes, Les, rightly so, but a man who's looked back fondly. So we've got to make some decisions here, haven't we?
Yeah. So we'll go from the top. We'll go from the first of our two picks. It's Shea Given against Freddie Woodman.
I'll give you Shea Given.
Okay, it's not a matchup I thought we'd be having, but Shea Given gets it. Hubbard Bay, Steve Watson. Two very different Newcastle United careers there.
But I think the fact that you spoke so fondly of Habby Bay means it's got to be Bay.
Yeah, I'll give you Hubbard Bay. That's absolutely fine. So Jonathan Woodgate gets a pass. Then we've got Florian Lejeune against Aaron Hughes. Oh,
it's difficult.
Again, two very different Newcastle careers, different eras, different players.
Love Aaron Hughes. But it's difficult because you weigh up, one did it and one didn't. So
surely you've got to go with the one that did it.
All right, well, we'll let you have Aaron Hughes in.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to repay the favour because I think David Santon gets it above Jose Enrique. So the back five is Shea Given, Hubbard Bay, Aaron Hughes, Jonathan Woodgate, and David Santon.
Then we've
got Milner out on the right, Ginny Wijnaldum in the centre, and then it's a battle between Elliot Anderson and Johan Kabay.
It's not a battle, is it? It's not a battle. I can't argue with the talent and ability. Like if we're judging them on what one's achieved, which is harsh on Anderson, but judging on ability alone, then right now it's Johan Kabay. They say come back in a year, it's probably going to be Anderson, I imagine. But we'll go.
I'm going to give you David Ginola against esteemed left winger Paul Gascoigne, and then up front it is Les Ferdinand, and then it's either Demba Ba or Andy Cole. Again, two very different players to try and weigh up.
Well, do you know what? Because I think Cole was he how near the top of the list was he for you?
If I'm honest, I'm tempted to give you Ba because I had Ba in my mentions, and if I'm honest, I could have made a solid case for Ba, for Mitrovic, for Cole,
Rondon.
For Rondon, I could have made solid picks for about 6 strikers.
Marlon Harewood,
yeah, Sibieski, Cucci.
Oh, don't hate on Sibieski.
I'm tempted to give you Ba. Though people probably be thinking, "What are you doing, picking down a Ba for Andy Cole?" But
did you go Ba?
let's go.
We'll
Let's
go,
go,
Bo. We'll
Bar.
go,
He didn't
Bo.
leave under a cloud, did he? I mean, that as a Newcastle United team would do some damage. You've got Shea Given, Habib Bey, Aaron Hughes, Jonathan Woodgate, David Santon, Johan Cabaye in the middle with Wijnaldum, Milner and Ginola on the flanks,
I mean,
Bar and Ferdinand on the.
when you look at that left-hand side, goodness me,
Yeah.
there's no defensive
Yeah.
ability there is. I mean, Santon could defend, but he liked getting forward more than anything.
Wijnaldum will drop in the 6 and defend. Don't worry.
That's a side that would win titles.
Team. It's a great team. Yeah.
Most certainly.
It's a team of what could have been.
Yeah. Well, there we go, ladies and gents. That is the picked start 11 from mine and Aaron's chosen. How many did we end in? 24, 25? Squad of 28 or something like that. As Aaron says, Shea Given in goal, Bay, Woodgate, Hughes, Santon at the back four, Milner on the right, Wijnaldum in the centre alongside Johan Cabaye, David Ginola on the left with Ferdinand and Demba-Ba up front. This is the starting 11 of players who we wish had stayed longer at Newcastle United. Thank you very much for tuning in. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. Get in the comments. Let us know what you think about our team. Let us know your team as well. I'll respond to every single one of you who get in and join in with the conversation. Thank you to NORD VPN for sponsoring the podcast. Thank you to you guys watching and listening. Please share it wherever you are. X, what's the other one called? Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Just share it. Give it a share. Really does help get us to a wider audience. Give the video a like as well. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And for myself and Aaron, we shall see you next Tuesday.
Yep.
Because Newcastle are going to beat West Ham on the Monday, right?
Yep. And we're going to do the Monday show on a Tuesday.
Celebrating 3 points. There we have it, ladies and gents. We'll catch you in a bit.